Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl Brewster of PIDP 3300. This is my final presentation on the effects of transformational learning and reflection on negativity bias. So before I get started, I'm just going to ask you to take a breath and just let in all the good from today. And as I take that breath, I am grateful to be speaking to you from West Vancouver and the unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. I am very happy to live and play here in the beauty of nature. So I'm Cheryl Brewster, and I'm really excited to share with you everything that I've learned so far. And I'll be covering three main areas: how transformational learning leverages negativity bias, how reflection is the bridge to changing one's mind, and brain-based practices to support ongoing growth. Now, I'm going to talk fairly fast because I've got a lot of information to cover here. And I'm excited because as a practitioner right now, who works with mentoring and helping people through transition and reinvention, I am very excited for what I'm learning on the neuroscience of the brain. And my desire is to go to that next level in my career. I've loved what I've done so far, and this is just the next step so that I can impact more people and be really, really effective at it as a speaker and an educator. So let's get started. I loved what our textbook said. We do not intend to overemphasize the brain's capacity for anxiety, but based on what experienced practitioners and adult learners have shared, too little attention is paid to this reality. I agree. When we go into something new, especially a learning environment, and when we're actually being graded, man, it's amazing what can come up. So I was really excited to learn about the transformational learning by Maslow. And his definition is that transformational learning is the expansion of consciousness through which an individual can question themselves about their own feelings, beliefs, perspectives, assumptions, and their purpose. That really grabbed me. Not only that, it's not just about understanding it, it's about transforming it, especially that negativity bias. And what appealed to me was he really emphasized that we start off with a disorienting dilemma. So, as we look at his 10 phases of transformational learning, and I'm only going to cover the first two steps, the disorienting dilemma and the self examination, it's really about freedom. It's about freeing ourselves from the rigidity of these unconscious programming that we have. So, how do we do that? He relied a lot on Dewey, and Dewey nailed it in my opinion. When reflection is the bridge of meaning that connects one experience to the next, it's kind of like this thread. So when we reflect, it moves us forward so that we can take this disturbing state of perplexity and bring it to a harmonious state of settledness or equilibrium. And his criteria for doing that were four. Basically, that reflection is a meaning-making process, moving the learner deeper into understanding experiences to ensure progress. And also included in reflection is systematic, rigorous, disciplined scientific inquiry. So not kind of frivolous questions, but deep questions. Now, this really caught my attention because I know it to be true from my work so far with the online seminars that I teach, that reflection happens best in community with interaction with others. People learn from each other, they grow, it's very organic, it's very real, exciting things happen. It's as an instructors, we have our curriculum, but the magic happens when people reflect what they've learned. Information doesn't create transformation. Reflection and sharing does. So I really loved finding that. He also identified a set of attitudes that value personal intellectual growth of self and others. And in my research, I was really excited to find a really great study by Carol Rogers of State University, New York. And it's in my references, where what she found when she researched the effects of reflective teacher education and professional development on teachers' practice and students' learning was that Dewey had subcategories for each of these four criteria. And the one that really caught my attention was his criteria on directness. And this is what she had to say about that. That Dewey said that directness can be best described by what it is not. It is not self consciousness, distractedness, or constant preoccupation with how others perceive one's performance. It's an absence of anxiety about oneself that makes it distinct and important. Trust in the validity of one's own experience without spending a lot of time worrying about the judgment of others. And in the beginning, teachers often lack this because they're so identified with the content, which is an evolution of passing from self absorption to forgetting oneself to self awareness. And the way we do this is by asking a self reflective question. We ask, where was the learning in today's work rather than what did I teach today? Dewey says this frees us. And so I put together this kind of little summary of the visual to help us with this. So the evolution of directors and teachers is trusting in the validity of our own experience without spending time worrying about the judgment of others. So the phase that it goes through is we go from self-absorption to forgetting about ourselves to self-awareness. And again, the question we ask ourselves is, where was the learning in today's work? Very different answer compared to what did I teach today. I found that incredibly powerful. I've been working with it and it truly is transformative. I'm grateful for this information because it's taking me deeper. So reflection is a very, very powerful tool, but we're busy. It takes time to reflect. And when you're busy, you kind of fight against pausing. So to help us with that is some proof, validity, empirical data. Harvard Business did a research on reflection, and they had a company in India that were having real problems with, keeping staff and just performance. They were losing people. So they had them reflect, and you can tell here from how it was conducted, a 50% increase. So they did it, they had three groups. One reflected 15 minutes after training, the other group reflected daily and shared with others what they learned, and then there was no reflection at all in the other group. No change in the people who didn't reflect. Massive change in the other two groups. And you'll notice that the reflection that was shared actually was higher. So we have empirical data, there's lots of studies on it. So what's really exciting then is when we go into Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset and fixed mindset. I highly recommend her book. It's an amazing piece of the research that she did. And she describes how in the teaching environment, the difference between learning and growing is having an open mindset. Now, when we're upset, when we've got that negativity bias going on, this is what happens. Um, Students see hard transition as a threat. It's all about the outcome, not the process. There's a fear of unmasking flaws. And I think we can all relate to this because it's like, you're feeling vulnerable inside and you don't want anyone to know. So it's a fear of not being seen as successful as well, which is why, uh, our students don't necessarily reach out when they could. A growth mindset, on the same hand, is that when students with a growth mindset reached an impasse, it made them even more determined. And they had the ability to just keep up with life. Learning didn't get them down and they didn't go into spirals of depression or feelings of inadequacy. Here's the main key difference is that growth mindset or open mindset valued the process, no matter what the outcome was. A growth mindset is more interested in the learning. And I love what she says in her book. Would you rather be flawless or learning? And so getting into the practice of saying the word yet, I haven't done this yet, means that it is in process. So really important for us as students, for ourselves to recognize, okay, is this growth or fixed mindset? But I think as facilitators, it's really important to encourage our students so that they're aware of this, so that when they meet it, they've got a little more, I would say, safety or comfort in reaching out for help. So let's talk about negativity bias, because that's the thing that really gets us into trouble. And I love what Hansen said on negativity bias, which is that he is a neuroscientist, a researcher, and in his studies and data, what they found was that negativity sticks like Velcro, and the good just falls off like Teflon. And that's why at the beginning of this session, I had you take in the good. Now, I didn't give you a lot of time to do that, but I wonder if you noticed a difference. So, passing along these tools, I think it's just, again, these are quick little things we can share with our students. The information is here, that the brain science and savvy of is that this is psychologically skillful, and it doesn't take much time to just look for the good in the day and feel it for only 20 or 30 seconds. And the impact that it has on the brain is enormous. It reshapes the brain, reshapes you. And the more that you can soak in that good feeling, that brain body connection is enhanced. So those neural pathways are being formed. Which takes us to some really interesting research that I found on where does negativity bias come from? It comes from negative legacy emotions. And negative legacy emotions, and this was so fascinating, guilt, shame, and anxiety. And Bregan, who wrote a book, and again, it's in the references, said that we have to remember that these are prehistoric emotions and they're irrational. And so we have to be aware, because they can take us out. It's not good for us. It's not healthy. And he even likened that the effect of guilt on the brain is it's like cocaine. So I found this really fascinating, because we can be addicted to negative emotion. We can be addicted to adrenaline. So it's important to know that, and it will be revealed during reflection. We can come and go with our goals, but if the pattern isn't really changing, it's because we have not resolved these negative legacy emotions within us. And so his research has shown that we need an absolute uncompromising rule to absolutely not allow these three emotions that are just old stuff way back when from taking over. And that's where we have to make a non negotiable, an uncompromising rule to reject these imperfect remnants of evolution. So Seligman, who is an amazing man, and his, again, in the references, he was a leading authority in the fields of positive psychology, resilience, learned helplessness, depression, optimism, and pessimism. He's written more than 350 scholarly publications and 30 books. So I'm going to listen to this guy when he says you have to embed optimism in your brain through the power of non negative thinking. And so the research is showing that as a negative thought comes up, that you just don't pay attention to it. It's like it's not allowed. You slam the door on it. And instead, you take your attention back to letting in the good and breathing that in. So I love how the neuroscience supports these transformational steps and theories, because these kinds of tools can work really quickly in helping us get out of that fight, flight, freeze. So, how do we do it? And again, I think this is so important to share with our students. One conscious breath. That's all it takes to create that pattern interrupt. Now, Tan, who worked for Google, created a mindfulness program, and he brought in all kinds of neuroscientists and researchers and psychiatrists, psychological psychologists. There we go. To create this program. It was so successful on Google that he actually left the company and started his own foundation. One conscious breath. That's all it takes. So as we move forward then and really understanding what comes up with this negativity bias, we have to really address this because there are tools that can support us in slowing down the fight, flight, freeze that just takes over. So, Hansen, who uh, what the and again, it's all in the references. Hansen, who did research as well, and he's written. There's so much material out there, and all of the research that they've done, empirical data. To take in the good is to internalize memory. And he described positive memory or positive experiences flow through the brain like water through a sieve. We just don't hang on to them. However, negative ones are caught every single time. Why? Because of that evolutionary brain that was always looking for danger. So, what I really appreciated about learning about this is, we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves and learning something new, and that negative spiral can really start. It's our biology, it's this evolutionary impulse, and knowing that it's something that we can learn to control, we can learn to identify, I think is absolutely life changing. And I really look at transformational learning as not only being for education but being for life. And so that's what I really appreciated about learning all of this. In the studies that they did, they found that um, by really transferring to letting in the good, that it impacted both implicit and explicit memory. So more able to access those positive emotions, to have that resource to be self-aware, uh, self-regulatory, and also to act on our own behalf, to take the initiative, to have that motivation. What ties into that then is this expectation of a future reward stimulates the motivation in the present moment. And that optimism can be taught. So, uh, in that first reference there, the expectation of future reward, in the book Neuroscience, both Mark Waldman and Chris Manning wrote a book called Neuro Wisdom, and they've done many other pieces. But their data was really, really interesting to study. Hansen is the founder of the Wellspring Institute of Neuroscience and an affiliate for the Greater Good Science Center at the University of California, Berkeley. So these are neuroscientists. This is proven empirical data, and the expectation of future rewards stimulates motivation in the present moment. This was also in a study that I found on optimism. It was a really interesting study called a 2-week scientific research on optimism intervention. This was in the Netherlands. And so for 2 weeks, they had these control groups. And the data was interesting because what they found was that daily imagery of your best possible self actually had better results than just uh, daily imagery of daily activities. The best possible self measured higher in optimism than daily imagery. So we see a theme going on here in the transformational learning that you're going to start off with that distressing dilemma or that negativity bias, and then to be aware of any negative legacy emotions that start ramping up, and then to use the neuroscience, the breathing, the letting in the good, and now this other phase of purposefully choosing expectation of a future positive reward for yourself, training yourself to actually be optimistic. And of course, in that research, they showed that there were higher levels of self esteem, motivation, well being, and a general sense of enjoyment for life. How does that impact learning? Well, it's huge. When you know that even though you might be feeling something that creates anxiety, but it's okay, you can handle it. Wow, that's going to have an impact. And of course, a calm mind will learn. A distracted mind, an anxious mind won't. So, creating these environments for our students is super important, which takes us to some really interesting information now in also understanding the power of metaphor. So, what I found was intriguing, and Mesereau really identified this, that understanding comes from finding the right metaphor to fit the experience. One of the research pieces or studies that I found in the Journal of Behavior and Brain Science on, and it was specifically focused towards reflective teaching and learning processes, was that uh, self-discovered imagery produces better retention. So, to get our students coming up with their own metaphors of what they're learning or going through life, well, they'll actually remember that, they'll identify with it. And that goes deep into the unconscious. And so that's where true change happens, is in the unconscious. So, the combination of taking this distressing dilemma, this negativity bias, and being able to turn it around is huge. Uh, when we are working with metaphor, when we're working with transformational learning, when we're working with reflection, and reflection is a really big thing here, and again, the science proves that it enhances synthesis of neurotransmitters, which means that we are creating new neuron pathways. We're getting out of the Grand Canyon and the Broadways that our textbook talked about, and we're creating new neural pathways. So, what's really exciting about this is not only does it help with learning, but it changes you as a person. So the question is, I think, for all of us, and how this is going to change how I teach and present now, is number one, it takes a lot of pressure off me. By using metaphor, and this is what the research showed in this study here, by using metaphor, it creates more clear up objectives for the teachers, and it also helps learners solve problems easier. So I was playing with this, and I created a metaphor for myself of what I want to create in my teaching, and it really hit home. And it's like, if I do start to find myself going into that anxiety, then I'll catch myself and I'll go, wait a minute, which horse do I want to ride? There's kind of like the negativity bias is wants control, and yet there's this other part that wants to grow and wants to learn. You can only ride one horse at a time. I want my horse to cross the finish line, and that horse is called success. The other horse, negativity bias, negative legacy emotions, that's just painful, and nothing changes. Old patterns remain. So, which horse do we want our students to ride? And because this is not only about outcome, it's about process, my bottom line learning and all of this is something that I'm going to share with you on the next slide. And it's a really cool quote by John Dewey. To me, faith means not worrying. I think he nailed it. So if we all take a breath right now and we let in the good from the day, and we do that over and over and over again, and instead of allowing negativity bias to take us out, or those negative legacy emotions, and instead we pattern interrupt them and we replace them with um, what we do want rather than what we don't want, as learners, as facilitators, as teachers, man, that's transformative. So here are my final concluding thoughts. When we started out, my focus on those three main areas was that transformational learning leverages negativity bias. That's a cool deal. That reflection is the bridge to changing one's mind, and that brain-based practices support ongoing growth. My closing thoughts: non-negotiable rule to exchange negativity bias for conscious breathing, taking in the good, and building optimism. The disorienting dilemma, or the negativity bias, or those negative legacy emotions, signal growth. That's a good thing. And even good things can feel uncomfortable at first because we're just not used to them, which is the whole point of transformational learning. Because the brain looks for patterns and it can't find them, it gets uncomfortable. And that's where the combination of reflection and these brain based practices are so very, very powerful for helping us be more receptive to learning and helping us have the energy to actually change our minds. What makes that shift to go from a closed mindset to an open mindset? It becomes a conscious decision. So, the combination of all of this is that now we have choice that we did not have before. The bottom line is rigorous reflection is foundational to the learning. So, my references, I hope that you'll enjoy. I really love this study by Carol Rogers, studying Dewey's material. Everything else is referenced. I highly recommend that you check out Hanson's work and also Mesereau's work, of course, and Dewey's, and Waldman's work. There's lots of really amazing research on any of their websites. And for anyone who has questions or about any of the other resources that I found, I'm happy to answer your questions. So thank you. I look forward to sharing more time with you as we continue the program. And I wish you all the best in your facilitation. And remember, a non-negotiable rule. That was my biggest takeaway, and I hope it's yours too. Thank you.